Hello, everyone. Welcome. My name is Shelley Arnold. I'm the Executive Director of the Memorial Park Conservancy. Warmly and genuinely welcome you here tonight. This is an important night for Memorial Park. It's one in a series of public meetings that we're having, public updates that we're having on the master planning process, where we are. Thomas Woltz and his team tonight from Nelson Bird Woltz will be updating you on the latest thinking in master planning for Memorial Park for the long term. We'll be taking questions. Before we get started, I wanted to thank Councilmember Stardig for hosting us tonight. We really appreciate her and her staff's work in inviting you all and helping us get set up here at this facility. Memorial Park is a city park. We are having these meetings all over the city to reflect that point and make sure that citizens all over Houston are involved and updated. I wanted to also acknowledge Councilmember Kubosh, who's joined us this evening, and thank you very much for your support and interest as well. And I believe State Representative Jessica Farrar has a staff member here she may not be here yet. We started a few minutes late, by the way, to give people time. Everyone was calling us and telling us the traffic was so bad and most everyone was late. So forgive us for a few minutes late start. With no further ado, let me introduce Councilmember Stardig. And thank you again for your participation this evening.
Thank you. I don't need to get on the stage, do I? I'm pretty tall. I'm pretty tall, so I don't need to get on the stage. Maybe I should. There's a large group, so I don't want to. First of all, once again, I'd like to thank Councilmember Kubosh for making the trip out to District A, and we appreciate him coming out. For those of you that may not know, when we have city staffers come out to District A, they always ask, "Are we still in the city?" And I'm like, "Yes, we are." So we appreciate everyone attending this evening, and it's important to me that everyone recognizes how many people are actually from the District A community tonight. That's good. Thank you for coming tonight. I want to remind everyone, and I constantly remind my colleagues, if you don't watch HTV and don't watch online City Council, you may not know, but I'm constantly reminding folks that there is life outside of 610 Loop, and there is the City of Houston outside of 610, and this is an opportunity for all of you to get to see what we have, the assets that we have out here as well. But with that said, it's so important that citizens of Houston, Houstonians, give their input, because Memorial Park is for everyone in the city of Houston. Do you agree with that? I am a native Houstonian, born and raised in Spring Branch. My family's been there since 1929. We truly believe that Memorial Park is for everyone in Houston. So I want to make sure that I'm here to support and facilitate and make sure that everyone has the voice. So thank you again for coming this evening. And if there's any questions afterwards, I'll be happy to hang out as long as possible. I do know that we do have a representative from Commissioner Cagle's office as well. I think Mark is here. And I also want to thank the representative from Jessica Farrar's office as well. So thank you all for coming. But I also want to take this opportunity to introduce my chief of staff. She's looking down, she's texting and taking care of business. Amy Peck, she's here on the front row. Stand up, Amy. My staff did a great job of putting this together tonight at a great location. We also want to thank the Management District and Jan for hosting us here at the White Oak Conference Center. So thanks again to everyone. And I know we were talking about traffic and everyone knowing that it's a little hard to get out this direction, but look at all those that did coming from work. So I'm going to hand it back over unless anyone has direct questions for me at this moment that can wait. If not, we'll turn it back over. Thank you again.
Thank you, Councilmember Stardig. Next, I'd like to introduce Chris Knapp. Chris Knapp led master planning for Herman Park and has been a very important voice and thought leader in the city on many Houston civic affairs. Chris was asked to step in and help us think through how to approach master planning for Memorial Park, and has dedicated countless numbers of hours and blood, sweat, and tears to helping us really move this process forward, including the identification of Nelson Bird Waltz to bring in. So Chris, if you would like to say a few words, that'd be great.
Thank you, Shelley. Do I need to stand up here or can I stand right here? Can everybody see me? I can see the person in the back. Okay, thank you. Welcome, everybody. I have had the honor and the pleasure, as Shelley mentioned, of leading the master plan design team selection for Memorial Park. I got into the public parks racket about 20 years ago in Houston with the early days of the restoration of Herman Park. And I do this as a volunteer because I believe that this city deserves magnificent parks. We've been blessed with some extraordinary gifts to the city over many years, often from generous families and individuals, and Memorial Park is one of those. How many of you know the size of Memorial Park? Can anybody tell me roughly? Anybody know the size of Central Park in New York? So it's Memorial Park is just a little bit under twice the size of Central Park in New York, just to put it into perspective. And just a little bit of an interesting history lesson for us proud Texans. Who knew that 3 people from Texas, all happen to be from San Antonio, have turned the world upside down in global park standards and the restoration of fabulous public spaces in New York City. Betsy Rogers founded what's called the Central Park Conservancy in New York in the late 70s, looking out her window at Central Park and saying, this trash can is not acceptable, and we have to do something about it. Thus was born the Central Park Conservancy, arguably the godmother of all successful public-private partnerships dedicated to urban green space restoration. Worry Price, another San Antonian, founded the Battery Conservancy at the lower tip of Manhattan, where you get on the ferry to go to the Statue of Liberty. It was all paved in asphalt. She looked at it and said, this is unacceptable. It's now a series of beautiful perennial gardens. If you are in Manhattan, go take a look. And most recently, Robert Hammond, who attended a town hall meeting one day because he saw in the New York Times that the city was going to tear down a disused elevated railroad track that ran from 14th Street on the west side of town up to about 40th Street, went to a town hall meeting, looked at the person next to him, I don't think he even knew, and said, they can't do that. So in good Texas can-do fashion, they started what's called the High Line, which has ultimately very effectively rebuilt essentially the west side of Manhattan. I mentioned Robert because it was through Robert that I met Thomas Waltz, who will be our primary speaker tonight. And I should say a couple of words about the whole master planning process. It can be a little confusing for a newcomer, but I guess the main thing I would like to say about it is that it's primarily driven by public input. It's not simply the process of hiring a design team from somewhere else who puts his or her pen to paper and says this is what it should look like. It's an incredibly complicated and very thoughtful process that's really based on public engagement. So with that, I'd like to introduce the leaders of our public engagement process, which are the folks from Lord Consulting, led tonight by Joy Bailey Bryan, if you'll raise your hand, Joy, who's done a fabulous job. This process actually started a little bit over 2 years ago. We started to identify what was a pretty short list at the time of what we thought were qualified teams to come and interview for the Memorial Park job. I should say another history lesson is that the public parks plan for the city of Houston is actually about 100 years old. A little bit over 100 years ago, the then mayor, brought a parks commissioner from Boston, a fellow named Comey, who drafted the first parks plan for the city of Houston called the Comey Plan. And interestingly, here we are a little over 100 years later doing this fabulous thing called BioGreenways, which is really all about using our bios as linear parks. That's exactly what Comey said we should do many, many years ago. Comey also identified a piece of land roughly where is now the medical center, which he called Pines Park, and he said this should be one of your central park spaces. That's what became ultimately Herman Park. So we have this incredible history in Houston. By 1930, between Herman Park, which was established in 1914, celebrating its centennial this year, Memorial Park in 1923, 24-ish, and McGregor Park roughly a little bit after, we had within what is now the Loop, which of course didn't exist at that time, we had McGregor Park about 300 acres, Memorial Park about 1,500 acres, and the original footprint of Herman Park was actually about a third bigger than it is today. It was 750 acres. So for a city of then roughly 300,000 people, we had an amazing per capita park acreage. Much of that really went out the window in post-World War development. I call it the dark ages for Houston parks. I grew up in the 1970s, and a very famous quote from a mayor when I was a child was that Houston didn't need parks because people had big backyards. I think that's what got me started on the Parks Restoration Project, which I'm still living today. So without further ado, I'd like to say a special word of thanks to the City of Houston, all of the public servants here tonight, representing City Council, County Commissioners, the Houston Parks and Recreation Department. Thank all of you for being here. We wouldn't be here if it was not for the continued support of the Parks and Recreation Department, and also importantly, the Uptown Management District, which is now annexed Memorial Park. That was very confusing for lots of people when it happened, and in a layman's terms, I'll just say that what it means is that the Uptown Management District is legally able now to spend money within the confines of the park. Funding for public park spaces in this city has been a challenge for many, many years, and I'd say we're incredibly blessed and fortunate to have this extraordinary partner, which has allowed us to proceed full steam ahead with a master plan, which you will hear about tonight. So with that, I'd like to introduce Thomas Waltz and his team, Jeff Ayton. Alyssa Diamond is here somewhere. Thank you all. And Thomas, I'd like to invite you up to the stage. And Thomas speaks for himself. He's done park projects and gardens around the world. He's been working on this project for a little bit over a year. Importantly, as I mentioned a few minutes ago, so much of the initial stages of this are all about public engagement and public input. It's only recently that we've started what we say putting the pen to paper. And this is public meeting number 2 in the unveiling of the plan. We're leading up to a final presentation around the master plan in the spring of 2015, which we will be announcing, or is probably already on the calendar today. So with that, Thomas, please, I'm sorry, Odile, welcome and thank you. I want you to come up and say, this is our fabulous translator. ¿Nos va a hablar en español?
Claro,
Bueno.
Esto aquí, ¿esto funciona?
Claro que sí, creo.
Si no, agarro este. ¿No? Agarro este. Gracias, Chris. Buenas noches y bienvenidos. Agradecemos su compañía esta noche. También quisiera agradecer la presencia de las siguientes personas. Nuestro anfitrión, Chris Knapp. Tenemos el honor de contar con la asistencia de la representante gubernamental del Consejo Municipal, la concejal Brenda Stardick del Distrito A, la cual ha expresado su sincero agradecimiento por su asistencia y les comunica que el parque es un recurso de todo el pueblo y por esto la importancia de hacerles saber a todo el público lo que está pasando. A través de un nuevo Plan Maestro General, el Memorial Park será restaurado, conservado y mejorado para poder ser disfrutado por todos los habitantes de la ciudad de Houston en los años venideros. Está con nosotros Shelly Arnold, representante de la organización benéfica llamada Memorial Park Conservancy, establecida en el año 2000 y cuya misión es la de preservar, restaurar y mejorar el Memorial Park. También contamos con la presencia de la representante de Houston Tiers, Sarah Newberry. Houston Tiers es una institución gubernamental creada por el Consejo Municipal para atraer nuevas inversiones localmente, financiando el costo de renovación y fomentando el crecimiento urbano de nuestra ciudad. Conduciendo este evento tenemos a Joe Bailey, representante de Lord Cultural Resources de Nueva York. Durante el transcurso de esta noche, traduciré al español algunas de las presentaciones en forma resumida. Si tienen preguntas, les hemos dado unas tarjetas para que escriban la pregunta y al final de la noche podemos contestarlas. Por último, también quiero agradecer la presencia del Departamento de Parques y Recreaciones de la ciudad de Houston. Por último, me complazco en presentarles al arquitecto Tomás Waltz, director de la prestigiada firma de arquitectos paisajistas Nelson Burr Waltz, que nos hablará acerca del plan maestro y nos pondrá al corriente de lo que hasta ahora se ha hecho. Le cedo la palabra al arquitecto Tomás Waltz.
Yeah, this is on. Actually, Thank you, Chris. I'm going to stay down here so that I can use my pointer. So I'll stay right here close to everyone. Good evening, and it's starting to feel like many, many familiar faces, like a big family in the room. So thank you all for coming. This is a fantastic turnout for a public meeting, and so we appreciate your support of parks and your support in helping this process move forward. The place that we are right now, I'm indicating here the beginning of November. We're in the phase that began in July and will end in March and April for the actual design phase of the master plan. The previous phases were the interview process, and our team was selected in August of 2013. Nearly a year of public input and research, then the programming and public input led to the design phase now. So hopefully you're starting to see the pieces of the park settle into place. That's where we are right now and what we're showing you today. I want to, for how many people have been to a previous meeting in this process? Outstanding. Okay, that's great. That's great to see. I didn't want to. How many haven't? I'll ask. Okay, great. Welcome. We're so glad. That's about half and half. So I will be summarizing the previous phases of work, but I won't be going exhaustively through them, else we'd be here till 1 a.m. However, they are available on the website for the master planning process that is at
memorialparktomorrow.org.
Excellent. It's at the bottom of your sheet. Also, during this evening, if you will take your index cards that you were handed and write down any questions that you have for the group. They'll be being collected in this basket all during the evening, read and then assembled. Often we get similar questions, so it's a way to sort of handle the influx of the questions, and then at the end we'll have a panel for question and answer. So, this is where we are. To recap the earlier meetings, the guiding principles that we have been developing came out of a process that Nelson Bird Woltz, Landscape Architects, my firm, holds very near and dear to our heart. And it's one of a process of listening very carefully to land. And those of you who have been at previous meetings have heard exhaustively about the historic research that we've done about this incredible piece of land, understanding that its current state as a wilderness park or as a forest has not always been that state. It's gone from the Reinerman tract of farmland to cultivated orchards to logging land to a military base. And then later with the Hare and Hare Plan and the Hogg family stewardship developed by the city of Houston into Memorial Park. So these many, many phases and layers of history from its earliest settlement pattern through Camp Logan to today are all interesting facts to us because we want the stories of this park to belong to this land and remain in this land. It's not about coming from the outside and putting a big mark or stamp on it. It's really about listening and finding ways that design can reveal these stories that the land has always had. So parallel to this, let's call it cultural history, is also a very important ecological history. And the way we tapped into that ecological history was through a very big part of our team that is our conservation committee. We have engaged Berg Oliver. They are conservation biologists who have done extensive testing and surveys across the park of soils, plant communities, understanding the hydrology, the wildlife communities. What is alive in the park? What is healthy in the park, and what could use a hand in the park? So rebuilding wildlife connectivity, managing invasive plants that have run rampant throughout the park, and really looking at, it's kind of a very important pivotal moment in time where the drought delivered a mighty and lethal blow to so many trees in the park. But that drought of 6 years, that tragedy, has also opened up the door to a glimpse of evaluating what are the native ecologies of this land. This is the sediment from the erosion of mountains as far as the Rockies. It's a deltaic plain, a long, broad, very shallow sloping delta of these soils that are very fine soils, highly erodible soils. So the plant communities that evolve there are a mix of savanna, pine forest, and hardwood forest. So the idea of grassland is is a really important and iconic Texas ecology. And it's what could find a home again in this park. And really one of the primary ecologies that would have been in the park hundreds of years ago. So you're seeing the list of Berg Oliver, John Jacob, our soils scientist, Hunt Design for wayfinding and signage, Sherwood Design Engineer, Civil Engineering, Susan Turner Associates of History, the lighting practice for lighting, operations and management and maintenance by ETM Associates. If we don't take maintenance into account every step of the way, this plan will never succeed. So anything we design, we're imagining its maintenance regime. What are the staffing needs? What is the expertise? What is the help that HPARD needs and the Conservancy needs to make this park really on par with its peers around the world? And then last listed here is our Ecotech panel. I should say, yes, the Nelson Bird Woltz crew is from out of town, but we have over 70 Houstonians who are part of our team. They are the scientists, historians, ecologists that are really helping us understand this place, because we are the design team and we glean all of our ideas from the base knowledge we find in this town and on the land. But we can accelerate our process by asking local people. Just like we listen to the land, we try to listen to local people. And this community is very much a part of that process. So this document that was compiled, really trying to capture the public input, and these were the issues that Lord Cultural Resources gleaned and brought into this document. Access. Accessibility is valued highly, including entry points to the park, connectivity to other parks in other parts of the city via multiple modes of transportation. Enhancement of the existing character and amenities and usage. A lot of people love this park, and we want to respect all of the great qualities of the park as it is, while enhancing and hopefully improving them. Communication. Ample and clear signage and messaging about the park offerings. And one of the things I think we're excited is to add into this is a layer about the important history. This incredible history that so few people know. The number of people we run into who aren't quite sure why it's called Memorial Park is something we'd love to put a stop to, so that everybody understands why it's Memorial Park, and that the signage and these rich stories of this land are told to every Houstonian and visitor to the park. Individual and community enrichment, educational programs, ways to experience the park's location, and way to socialize with others and feel a sense of community in this park. Balance. The balance between nature and recreation. This is one that we have looked very carefully at, and hopefully we are finding that proper balance. It's a very important topic. Safety and security with all, I guess you get into this business to design parks because you care about people's health, you care about people's engagement with nature, and their safety and security within the park is paramount. The long-term sustainability, this is at the heart of our practice and at the heart of what we try to bring to our park projects, and thus you'll hear a lot about rebuilding the savanna ecology, the prairie ecology, and a healthy, balanced forest. So these guiding principles that the public process gave us led to 5 words that have been sort of our check sheet for each new thing we design or think about. We go back to tend, the stewardship and care of the park. Magnify, make the things that are wonderful in the park more visible. Optimize, Memorial Park's parts are out of balance with each other, rearranging them so that the park can function optimally. Reconnect, and this is really about connecting this park to the rest of the city, as well as connectivity within the park. And reveal, Memorial Park holds stories relevant to all Houstonians. Let's tell these out loud. So for about the third to half of you who haven't been here before, this is a 2-side summary of an entire presentation where we started with the original land holding that is now Memorial Park. You can see the Buffalo Bayou to the south, and this is that same piece of land but within the Reinerman Tract, which was the original farm that the now Memorial Park was the southwest corner of. And that's in 1834. Pardon me. What we concluded was we went decade by decade and added in all of the different roads and divisions and interventions that had happened on this piece of land. And what we ended up with was 25 different parts of park divided by roads. So sadly, it was the fate, as Chris mentioned, of many parks around the United States in the 60s and 70s, was that they became the dumping ground for ball field, for stadium. That didn't happen here, but thanks to the vigilance of many citizens. But it did become laced with interconnected highways, major roads. So this to us was one of the great challenges. You have 1,500 acres that never feels like 1,500 acres because you hike along and you come to a big road. So are there ways we could start to resolve that issue of the park that's been so dramatically subdivided? So that led to this conclusion of one of the major initiatives being to try to reconnect the park in creative ways and use landscape architecture as the vehicle for restitching the park together so that it's the park triumphant over the highway rather than the park subdivided by roads. This slide summarizes another analysis, which was to look back at all the different interventions, the primary interventions on the land, and commit to future disturbance happening only in parts of land that had already been dramatically disturbed. So this is the final slide from a long list of layered slides that had the imprint of Camp Logan, subsequent development, the Hare and Hare Plan, and this sort of Band-Aid color is indicating the pre-disturbed areas. So we have tried to focus new disturbance within those areas to respect the tranquility of the southern half of the site and the northwestern quadrant that are more intact. And so this slide is the existing site organization. This was the part of the final slide series at the last public meeting. So here you're seeing athletic fields south of Memorial, the picnic loop area with its parking lots and roads, the Seymour Lieberman Trail, and then 3 different zones to the north of athletic fields. This is the Houston Arboretum and Nature Center that's in a different color in this presentation. In tonight's work that I'm rolling out, we've started to color it with the rest of the park, because obviously it is a critical part of Memorial Park. It's all one big landholding in one park, but it has its own unique character. We had been highlighting it like this, and in this phase, we've decided to start to show its ecology so you could start to really feel that landmass stitched together. So here are the initiatives and our goals from the last phase is to take these athletic fields and bring them up to the north, to bring them along the highway, to take out the lighting, the noise, and the maintenance in the southern part of the park and restore the ecology of that southern part of the park so that it's really more the hiking trails, biking trails, and wildlife portion of the park. And then these can then share resources to the north, like parking, transportation, concessions, and amenities. The next was to take this large single area of picnic loop, and this is a sort of diagrammatic concept, disperse picnicking throughout the rest of the park. Then these sort of green patches are the areas that we're then allowed to stitch back together and restore. I use the term restoration ecology very often, and that's where we look to the native plant communities, the soil types, and the soils tell us what plants they can best support, whether that's prairie, savanna, or forest. So again, it's one of those things of really listening to the land and making your decisions based on that reading. What you're seeing is how can we bridge, one of the things that we had really noticed in that park divided exercise is that northwest quadrant with the double lanes of Memorial driving through it really divide it in half. And our hope was if we could get Memorial to come up and plug in at the same place, but by hugging the highway, we could reconnect hundreds of acres that are cut into 3 slots right now. Similarly, the Eastern Loop cuts between a couple hundred acres right here and subdivides it in 2. The picnic loop is kind of an interruption when moving east to west in the southern part of the park. So those are areas that we started to look at for interventions that would be part of this restoration ecology. These blue areas are areas where we looked back to history to inform us. These western 3 blue areas are the footprint of some of the regiment camps of Camp Logan. And this area to the right was an important piece of the Hare and Hare plan. So these are another layer, this history layer, that we're hoping to bring to the fore. This was the final slide at the last meeting, where perhaps the most dramatic attempt to restitch giant portions of the park together, the park triumphant. I don't know, maybe that's too dramatic to say, but the park has won over Memorial. Day one, it was made very clear to us that Memorial Drive was not going away. And we couldn't sink it because all the water from the northern part of the park drains under it. So we would be creating a dam, and it would be a submersed, an underwater highway. So that wasn't going to work. So this idea of lifting a substantial amount of parkland up and over the highway to make a land bridge, a living bridge, just in front of the living bridge, which was really, in our minds, the very first outstanding attempt to restitch the park together. And it kind of led to these other ideas. So from the living bridge, moving forward, you have about an 800-foot tunnel and then another 350-foot tunnel that allows you to go through with a big light well in the middle. They're very short. When you're driving along, they'll pass quickly, but what they give you is prospect up over, you'll be 35 feet above the park. So it gives you prospect out across the entire park. This might be, and this is concept level, of course, but this is sort of what they would look like and the heights you would achieve in this kind of prairie draping up and over the highway. Claudine? If you'd like to speak, Odile.
Gracias. Ok, el arquitecto nos habló de la historia del parque y cómo su firma arquitectónica se propone escuchar lo que la tierra tiene que decir, haciendo estudios con científicos locales y trabajando en conjunto con ellos. Después de un estudio intensivo acerca de lo que la gente quisiera ver en el parque, se recopilaron las prioridades públicas y se determinó que los siguientes puntos son los de mayor interés para los habitantes de la ciudad de Houston. Fácil acceso al parque y sus actividades, un sentido de comunidad es importante, balance entre la naturaleza y las obras hechas por el hombre, seguridad para los usuarios, comunicación o conectividad entre las diferentes áreas del parque que ahora se encuentran divididas, sostenibilidad a largo plazo y mejoramiento de los servicios y amenidades y usos del parque. También nos dio una guía de principios. La guía de principios para dicho proyecto fue formulada por el equipo de Nelson Byrne Walls para incorporar y resumir el proceso de aportación y participación del público y del equipo de expertos técnicos que se contrató aquí localmente en Houston. Los siguientes principios guiarán al equipo de arquitectos mientras avanzan en el diseño y son los siguientes. El cuidado del Parque Memorial el parque necesita de nuestros cuidados, ayudemos al mantenimiento del parque siendo buenos ciudadanos. El hacer visible. El Parque Memorial tiene mucho a su favor. Hagamos las cosas más visibles. La optimización. Las áreas del parque están fuera de balance la una con la otra. Arreglémoslas de manera que el parque funcione óptimamente. Volvamos a conectarnos. El Parque Memorial está dividido de muchas maneras. Hagámoslo uno y conectémoslo a la vida de la ciudad de Houston. Revelación. El Parque Memorial contiene historias pertinentes a los habitantes de la ciudad de Houston. Contémoselas al mundo entero. Continuamos. El arquitecto también habló acerca de un gran plan maestro cuya intención es la de conectar todas las partes del parque, limitar los linderos visuales, creando una mejor experiencia para los usuarios dentro del parque y mantener los elementos existentes de los programas del parque. Algunas áreas del parque se han visto afectadas. Nuestra meta es la de limitar desarrollo futuro de las áreas que han sido alteradas por desarrollos anteriores. Otra meta es la de conectar las áreas de actividad deportivas, tales como béisbol, rugby y fútbol, que requieren más infraestructura, combinando las áreas de programas similares y mejorando los servicios, tales como estacionamiento, eso es muy importante, y baños públicos. Al hacer todo esto, se intentará causar el menor impacto al parque y también tendrá prioridad el tratar de hacer que estas áreas sean de fácil mantenimiento. También queremos localizar las áreas para días de campo del parque y hacerlas accesibles al público vía carro, bicicleta, a pie y, por último, hacerlas accesibles a aquellos en silla de ruedas. Queremos invitar al público en general a hacer uso de estas áreas y promover actividades familiares, creando experiencias positivas e inolvidables. El arquitecto Walsh nos mostró varias vistas aéreas del puente que se planea construir para unir las distintas áreas del parque. Usando un puente que imite a la naturaleza, se crea una conexión ecológica que nos permite una conectividad la cual no impacta la experiencia del usuario. Muchas gracias. Tom? Okay. Well, I need to write.
Okay. All right. So this map, as we move forward into today's presentation, this is the preliminary assessment from Berg Oliver, where we're seeing the results of the drought. What they did was map the unaffected areas in dark gray and the highly affected areas in, well, it's red hatch on my computer. I don't know what color that is, but it's bright red on my computer. And as I mentioned earlier, this was this tragedy, but also an ecological reset button for the park. And I think what is to come is a more sustainable future for the park. We're looking to the most drought-resistant ecologies, because this horrible thing happened. And I hate to be the one to say it, but it's probably going to happen again sometime in our lifetime. So if we have embraced the most resilient ecologies that are the least dependent on irrigation and chemicals and those sorts of things, then we've done a good day's work. So no surprise that those least affected areas were along the drainage ways called barrancos. And you can start to see in this map the interconnectivity of those drainage ways through the park. As we look to these, as in the upper right-hand corner, the historical patterns of vegetation, soils, hydrology, and site conditions, these are the recommended ecologies that we hope to work within. And they are the pine hardwood forest is the dark green, wet prairie, savanna is the blue, upland prairie is the beige, and then native prairie is here along the railway. There are patches of savanna forest, savanna, and savanna prairie as well, but in much smaller proportion. When we restore these ecologies, each one has a different spatial construct. So the density of the forest down close to the bayou that holds the banks, that holds the barrancos, and holds the soil would have this kind of density, 100 to 150 trees per acre. So that will be that feeling of the dense forest that much of the park had up until 6 years ago. But much of the composition of the park was Chinese tallow and privet. So it wasn't the native plant family that we're aspiring to restore it to. In the areas of savanna, we're looking at 50 trees per acre, a much more open canopy, sunlight hits the floor, and the ground plane is 20% shrubs and 70% herbaceous. In the prairie, you're looking at open grassland with mottes of oak trees. So these small groups represent the mottes. So these three general ecologies have kind of a gradation between them when they come to their edges, but these are what we're looking for as our baseline vocabulary within the park. So this map maps out those different ones. You're seeing the dark, again, green on my computer, dark brown here, riparian forest. Then you're seeing the pine hardwood forest fingers coming up around the golf course and up around the northwest corner. Pine hardwood savanna that I was just mentioning on these upper plateaus, and then native prairie here at the heart of the park, bisected by the rail. And we're referring to the golf course initiatives as maybe some new management techniques that we're referring to it as a naturalized golf course. These patches here are the wet savanna and prairie as mapped by Berg Oliver during this research. So what you're starting to see is a kind of a new pattern that looks different than the way we think of the plan of Memorial Park, perhaps. You're not seeing the east-west subdivision that Memorial Drive creates. You're seeing rather the big, large-scale pattern. And I think if this design can reveal to people that this northwest area south of the Equestrian Center is actually a drainage way that connects to the bayou here and down, you can start to see that in this diagram, that ecology will tell the story of the soils and the river. So this is our dilemma. This is the problem. These are the existing, we're calling them the corridor roadblocks and scattered program. We have ball fields deep into the southern quadrant. We have roads coming deep into the southern half of the park, and then scattered athletics in different locations. And then these subdividing roads that, as you can see, what I was just mentioning, that big pattern of connectivity is lost when it's chopped by these different roads. So, goal 1, reconnect the western riparian corridor by moving the road to the edge of the property, restitching this together, eliminating that western spur of Memorial, not eliminating, excuse me, we are not eliminating Memorial Drive. Moving Memorial Drive to the west, it's insignificantly longer, and stitching all of this landmass together for a use as equestrian and pedestrian trails and bike. And then linking this drainage way under 610 into the archery property and into the bayou, and treating that along the way, because now it'll be running through this prairie ecology. The next piece is to extend an access way to the north, create small parking lots here, and a pedestrian link that would go up and over the railroad bridge. At the last public meeting, I invited anyone who wants to help us try to lobby to get that railroad bridge. We would really appreciate your help, because those are things that take a long time. But with public support, we might be able to, with your help, get a pedestrian crossing up and over the rail line. And then by dispersing Picnic Loop, we can remove the roads, the paving, asphalt, and start to restore that ecology and connect from this drainage way to this drainage way with footpaths. Here is something that I think very few people even know, that you're crossing a major waterway, a major drainage way, as you move along Memorial Drive. Right in this location, it's draining several hundred acres to the north. All of the Memorial Park to the north is coming right through this slot and draining into the bayou. So protecting that corridor is very, very important. So when trails go through it, making sure they're stable, sometimes even using boardwalk so that you're up off the ground and the foot traffic and cycling traffic isn't eroding the soils further. So that drainage way is very important. And one of the ideas is actually to lift Memorial Drive up as a bridge that would get it up so that the experience of walking and running under it is a humane experience, not a rat-like experience. So you're not crawling through a pipe, but you're actually able to walk with the bridge arching up. And I think that will also bring an awareness for all the people, the thousands of people taking Memorial Drive, that you're lifted up over, on a bridge over the drainage way. By moving the eastern loop to the east, we can reconnect this entire piece of land and bring a new gathering space to the park. By moving this entry road to the east, we can do a similar connectivity piece to the northeast corner. And then the large move of the land bridge, reconnecting north and southern parts of the park by having by bringing those two halves together by lifting up over Memorial Drive. One of the, should I do a translation here? No, where would you like? It's coming, right? Okay. In the previous map, you can see there are all of these sports fields to the south. We have collectively as a team and by mandate from the mayor, we are not eliminating any athletic fields from Memorial Park, and we are not adding any new fields. So we're keeping the number that are there, but we are moving them so that they can share parking, roads, access, fire suppression, lighting, all of those things, so that these 4, 5 fields to the south, we're proposing to move here against the highway to the north. So here is the slide where you see rugby, volleyball and croquet, soccer, softball, baseball, a quad of baseball diamonds, a new driving range, and then the tennis center, and then a natatorium, and by building the pool indoors. This would be a facility then that kids could use year-round. You could teach swimming lessons to children year-round, and it would eliminate the noise from the pool that is a problem for the neighborhood, for the Camp Logan neighborhood in Crestwood. So you improve the amenity, you give year-round access, and you completely eliminate the sound coming from it by making an indoor natatorium. So we feel like that's a rather positive move. Currently, there are baseball fields right here along the property line, so we're moving those inboard, adding buffering and screening all the way around this edge. So we're really trying to not only protect the view of the neighborhoods looking into the park, but frankly, we'd like to protect the view of the park user from the neighborhood so that you can really feel like you're in this urban oasis, that you've left the city, that you're sort of immersed in this forested edge wilderness park. So the less we see of houses in the neighborhood, the better we are inside the park. The commitment to stormwater management has been important, and from the very beginning of this project, there is a pump here on I-10 that sends water into a ditch that drains to the bayou. So we thought to collect that water into a constructed wetland that would clean the water, give it contact and time with plants. So we're taking that highway water and cleansing it before it goes back into the bayou with this new pond here. Here within the golf course, you'll see we're proposing to expand those ponds so that we could have more water capacity held for irrigation. We would love to try to offset the drinking water that's being used to irrigate the golf course right now. It's 68 million gallons of water a year. And if we could collect that from rainfall, that would also be a day's work done. And you get beautiful ponds out of it. Be prepared. They're not all always beautiful. In drought, they will fluctuate and drain down. But for the years that they can do their job optimally, it's a pretty fantastic amenity to have for wildlife, water quality, and a long-term sustainability for irrigation. To the east end, we are proposing a new sort of entry gesture that as you come into the park, now you sort of find yourself in the park, and there isn't a kind of gateway. And so we thought it would be appropriate to celebrate that and to have a pedestrian bridge over. It won't be anything as dramatic as the land bridge, but so you'd have a way over here, under here at the drainage way, and then over here at the land bridge. So 3 major access points across Memorial Drive. So this is a kind of summary slide that is showing the different gestures that I've mentioned, and this is probably a good point for Odile to bring everybody up to.
Gracias. Ok, en esta sección el arquitecto Walls mencionó un asesoramiento preliminar de las áreas afectadas y no afectadas por la sequía y el huracán Ike. También se habló de los estudios hechos por científicos locales y lo que se planea hacer para alcanzar un balance ecológico en el área. Se mencionaron las distintas clasificaciones del parque, arbolada, sabana y pradera. Nuestra meta es la de optimizar y agrandar los pasillos ecológicos o senderos y conectarlos, dándole solución al problema de un parque dividido y unificar los programas deportivos. Al unificar los pasillos ecológicos, riachuelos, barrancos, sabanas y bosques y las praderas, el usuario podrá tener una experiencia completa si así lo desea. La fauna, las comunidades vegetales y los flujos naturales de agua serán restaurados. Mientras que los sistemas viales y vías de ferrocarril son parte integral del parque y su historia, estos interfieren con el funcionamiento ecológico del parque y la forma en que la gente y la fauna interactúan con las zonas ecológicas. Vimos una variedad de diapositivas que nos mostraron cómo se planea unir las diferentes partes del parque y organizarlas de manera que las áreas deportivas queden todas en una misma área de preferencia, impactando las áreas vírgenes del parque lo menos posible. Nuestra intención es crear un balance entre las obras hechas por el hombre y el sistema ecológico, manteniendo la mayor cantidad de áreas verdes no impactadas por el hombre. También es importante mencionar que se planea recolectar el agua de las lluvias para crear pequeños lagos e irrigar el campo de golf y de polo. El resto de las áreas no se irrigarán artificialmente, sino que recibirán su agua por medio natural, esto es, por medio de la lluvia. Tratando de resolver el problema visual y de ruido entre los usuarios del parque y las carreteras, y también entre el parque y los colonos que habitan junto al parque, se crearán barreras para amortiguar el ruido formadas a base de árboles, arbustos y bermas. Se planea una berma o barrera a forma de montículo o colina con una formación de árboles en la orilla de la carretera interestatal 10. Muchas gracias.
So another piece of the design of the park is the creation of a gathering space. One of the questions we've had from people is where do we go with a blanket to throw frisbee that's not a sports field, it's not an organized sport, it's not a team sport? Where can we go with families or have a gathering with lots of friends, picnics, picnic blankets, and just toss a football? And so the idea of a gathering space in the park that was more inspired by a clearing in the forest, a kind of large-scale clearing in the forest where we keep and maintain any of the healthy trees that remain, but in this area to the east, take our cue from the Hare and Hare plan where they had a circular gathering space with a conservatory in it to the eastern part of the park, that in not exactly the same location, but roughly, to have this kind of gathering space that would connect to the entryway. You could look down a long alley of trees to this lawn, and then this lawn would overlook the new pond. And so we're reducing an awful lot of mown grass in the park. And that's mown grass that nobody uses or really walks through or necessarily enjoys. But all the medians along Memorial Drive, when you start to add up all the little bits and pieces that could be converted to prairie or savanna communities, providing better habitat for birds, holding the soil, but then having two lawns that are 1% of the park acreage as lawn that you really use. So you spend that time and money to irrigate and mow it, but it's a lawn that would really be used, is our hope for the park. So that's the origin of that. The other is to create some kind of living memorial for the era of Camp Logan, a history that is almost lost within the park today. So building these access ways that are in the locations of the historic divisions between the regiments of the camp to the western part of the park. In fact, Camp Logan, we think, was located here because of its proximity to the Eureka Line rail that still runs right through the park. So these are demarcating the historic boundaries of those regiments. And then perhaps those areas could be developed, like the upper right-hand corner, replanted as pine groves that are almost like the soldiers that that died in service in World War I, so that those pine trees stand as perfectly as a squadron of soldiers. This is an historic photo of what those encampment buildings look like, and they have this grid of trees marching through them. This is an overlay of the historic plan of Camp Logan, and you see just how much of Memorial Park it consumed. Another idea is a proposed public equestrian center that would be located not far from the polo practice field that's within Memorial Park, but would have an access point here from Memorial Drive up to some kind of new equestrian center. The idea of public access to horses has long been in the park. This quadrant was used for horseback riding from the Camp Logan days forward, and the idea of enhancing the horseback riding trails that are in this quadrant became an idea that connects to both history, recreation, and is made possible with the elimination of Memorial Drive. We also wanted to do, one of the things you'll see in this plan, I'm going to dive in great detail into trails in this meeting, is to separate activities that maybe aren't great together, like little children and horses, for example, or very high-speed timing riders on racing bikes and pedestrians. So we're trying to find, with 1,500 acres, we can really accommodate each use within the park through careful design and coordination. So this perimeter trail would be a cycle track, and inside of this area, this is an enormous piece of land. I know at this scale it looks like, oh, those must be bumping into each other. But it's a really big piece of property that can accommodate both the cycle track and the horseback riding, but they never see each other or intersect. This is a really important concept of the plan and probably one of the first initiatives that would begin in the implementation of this master plan. The buffers, the forested buffers along the Crestwood neighborhood, the Camp Logan neighborhood, and along Highway 10, and then along 610 to the west and north. Along the athletic fields, the noise of the highway is a problem for the entire park, for the whole northern half of the park. We're putting the ball fields there because ball fields have bright lights and make noise and attract lots of people, and that seems like its best location for a wilderness park are near the highway itself. This little diagram is showing you if this is the park side and we berm up, we're proposing a 20-foot high berm of soil that would be planted with hardwoods and pines. So it would become an elevated forest edge that would start to screen the park from the cars. The berm on the highway side acts, you think about sound from cars, the sound is in waves, right? So as it goes across and it hits that land, it deflects back up. So it actually is really efficient for blocking sound. Plantings alone, in my experience, aren't so hot. They can diffuse sound a little bit, but it's really earth or a wall that can really start to make a difference. So our hope is to create much more quiet for the park users by building this berm to the north. To the east, it's all level. We don't have the grade change of the highway, so we're looking to densely plant that area with trees that would be limbed up for seeing through and for safety. Reconnecting the western fragments. This is archery that we have not forgotten about. We're working to bring it into the narrative of the park and connecting the Weiss Tract to archery, archery to the Post Oak neighborhood, and bringing it into the narrative of the park. Similarly, for Hog Bird, to the east, it has its parking lot, but removing the invasive plants, and really finally encouraging it to be the bird sanctuary that it's been called for a long time, and it needs some enhancement of plantings to really make it come true. Parking, a very big issue. This master plan initiative is not removing any parking from the park. We're having the same amount of parking, but what we're trying to do is wisely distribute it throughout the park. So you would have at the maintenance center parking along the Great Lawn, parking at the sports and natatorium, the tennis and natatorium center and the athletic building, maintaining all the parking that's at the golf course, adding parking at the ball fields, parking along the road here on the loop, and parking between these memorial groves of the Camp Logan Memorial, parking to the south for dispersion for all the trails, parking inside of the Houston Arboretum and Nature Center, parking at the public water access of Archery, and then parking along the newly located Memorial Drive, and then parking here to the northwest with the pedestrian link across at the future equestrian center. So we've taken that parking and dispersed it around the park, and our hope is that people going to different destinations will go to that associated parking lot rather than one big centralized parking by distributing it across the site. So this summary is a park that balances a more resilient natural environment, improved recreation and amenities, and the site's rich history and setting. So this kind of is summarizing those pieces to date. After, Odile, do you need to talk now, or is it in a?
I could, yes.
Okay, we'll do that.
And then the next is the last one.
Exactly. And so what I'll do when I step back up is we're going to zoom into the beginnings of the design here, here, and here. And I want to, just before Odile translates, I wanted to just touch on the idea of what a master plan is. I think it's always important to state this each meeting, and I didn't say this when I opened up. But one doesn't build from a master plan. So we have a year of public input and nearly a year of design. And these are designs about, are things falling into the right places, and are the networks of transportation, parking, ecology, restoration, sustainability, and management and maintenance, are those networks being considered holistically? That is really the job of a master plan, is to think at that holistic level. One doesn't build from a master plan. So in April, when this master plan is completed, certain aspects of it would be selected, and then they would begin a process of schematic design, design development, construction documents, bidding and negotiations, and then implementation. So these are very big picture ideas and big picture systems. And we want to get this right so that any project that follows for the next 25 years, let's say, would be logical and interconnected to its neighbors in a way that is very cohesive and that makes sense. One of the deliverables that we will present in April will be a phasing study. You know, as you're seeing, you've got to move a lot of stuff to make this plan work. So you have to build a field before you can retire the field, and it's sort of shifting pieces around. So it's going to take a lot of planning and thought, and that's what the master plan, a very important aspect of it that I just wanted to communicate to the audience.
Thank you. En la época de la Primera Guerra Mundial se creó el campamento militar Logan en lo que es ahora nuestro parque, y en honor a estos soldados se le dio el nombre al parque, Memorial Park o Parque Conmemorativo. Parte del plan maestro consiste en crear una gran línea de árboles en el lugar donde anteriormente se encontraba este campamento para honrar la memoria de nuestros soldados. También se verá la oportunidad de respetar la idea original de la firma arquitectónica Hare & Hare, la cual fue la firma originalmente contratada para el proyecto del desarrollo del Memorial Park hace muchos años. Se está estudiando la posibilidad de crear un área verde o jardín en forma elíptica que constituye el plan original del parque. La intención de esta área es que tenga usos múltiples y se espera que la gente pueda sentirse en comunión con la naturaleza, sentarse a leer, a platicar, etc. También se planea construir un monumento conmemorativo. Se planea conservar los senderos ecuestres y establecer una separación entre los usuarios para resolver el conflicto existente. Se está estudiando la posibilidad de programas ecuestres para la comunidad y de hacer más eficiente el uso de los senderos para ciclistas. Algo muy importante y de interés al público es el problema del estacionamiento. se planea solucionar este problema dispersando los estacionamientos para proveer un mejor acceso a las diversas actividades encontradas en el parque. El estacionamiento a lo largo de Memorial Loop Road será removido, permitiendo que el tráfico fluya en ambos sentidos. Áreas de estacionamiento discretas y una red de senderos conectados darán acceso a todas las distintas áreas del parque. El diseño de estacionamiento que se está proponiendo realmente no significa una pérdida de espacios para estacionarse, sino un sistema más adecuado y práctico.
So I wanted to dive into trails. This is something that has been the result of many conversations. We've met with the cycling community, running community, horseback community, and did I miss one? I think it's, yeah, running, cycling, and horseback, walking, and nature lovers. And so this is your existing trail network. There's a total of 27 miles within the network. We're proposing to end up with around 50 miles of trails to explore greater parts of the park. And here's what that might start to be. So the trails, as I mentioned, are separated uses. So what I wanted to do was walk through the pedestrian trails, and now I'm including the Houston Arboretum and Nature Center. So we have 8.5 miles of trails within the Houston Arboretum and Nature Center. And we are not designing that. Our outstanding colleagues, Design Workshop and Reed Hildebrand, are the landscape architects for that project. But we are sharing a lot of information very fluidly between the two organizations. So we've included that because it is part of Memorial Park. So 8.5 miles of that are within the Arboretum and Nature Center. You're seeing the Seymour Lieberman Trail at a full 3 miles. Well, I'll go through each one. We'll break down this way. So connectivity network. These are mixed use of cycling and pedestrian. It is 7.5 miles of connective tissue that uses the power line easement north and south, and north and south of Memorial, over the land bridge to connect, and then down Woodway and up to Memorial Drive. So that's 7.5 miles of mixed-use, multi-use trail, hard surface. The Memorial Loop, this would be a new thing within the park. This is a 9.5 mile trail that would take you through the northwest, the equestrian center, over the land bridge, into the southern part of the park, around the different barrancos, across the entry piece to the eastern gathering area, and up through the athletic fields along the Loop Road. So if, for those of you who could run 9.5 miles, this is your spot. And this is a mixed-use trail. And this is providing connectivity throughout the park. So this is, what we're trying to do is keep people oriented, so that if you want to meander along the bayou, you still do that as you always have. But when you come upon this trail, you know which way is which, and you have a slight orientation device that runs throughout the entire park. So it's almost like a wayfinding, the little Rosetta Stone of the park. This is the Seymour Lieberman Trail at a full 3 miles, and then a proposed timing track. For now, we're showing it right here next to the SLT, the running center, excuse me. And this is Seymour Lieberman Trail. Now, from the Seymour Lieberman Trail, you could hop onto the multi-use trail. It wouldn't be just runners anymore. You'd be with other people. This is, Seymour Lieberman is just runners, but if you wanted to hop here, you could come up over the land bridge and explore another several miles to the south. The Bayou Trail is 3 miles with other hiking and running trails at 8 miles. So this would be dedicated to the Bayou. This would be your quiet trail, your bird watching trail, views to the river, to the Bayou, and along the woodland edge. These trails would allow you to explore hiking and running into the forest. This is another proposed hiking and running trail that comes up into the northwest quadrant, and then hiking and running in Archery. And you can see here we're proposing, these are a much more intimate scale path. This is a 4-foot wide path, quiet trail, not big crowds, really your intimate experience. So each trail network is giving you a different width, spatial experience, and experience within the park. The Arboretum trails, 8 miles that I mentioned earlier. As a big public amenity, those are coming in at 20 feet wide. So they are really going to take the crowds that are in the Arboretum. And again, this is outside of our scope of design. Cycling trails, we have mountain bike trails coming all through this area, and this area. And then the timing track that's 1.5 miles around the horse trails to the northwest. The connectivity network that I mentioned earlier at 7.5 miles, the Memorial Loop 9.5 miles, the cycle track and the kids loop here at this, we're calling this a family recreation center. It's where that parking lot is, and it has a lot of adjacencies for playground and activity for all different ages of family. These are the dedicated mountain bike trails, 8.5 miles of mountain bike trails, and then a kids zone right here, this sort of intestinal piece, is a 1 mile kids track. Now, each of these is being designed, super elevated for this activity. We have a trail consultant that we're working with out of Whistler, who is advising us on the quality, the materials, the slopes, the grading, the drainage, making sure that these are long-lasting but very exciting trails, because we want to discourage trail blazing. We want to discourage folks cutting their own trails, but really giving them world-class, outstanding trails for getting them into the woods. And then 3.5 miles of equestrian trails to the northwest at 12 feet wide for those. So this summarizes not only the athletic fields and the roads and the bridging, but also now the trail networks. You can start to see the master plan coming together at this very large scale. I'm going to run through these in closing. These are where we're kind of laying the groundwork for our next meeting, where we've developed these to kind of roll through how this would build up over time. So you're looking at the northeast corner. Washington is up this way. Arnott's down here. And you can see these ball fields come all right to the property line of Memorial Park, and their private residences right here. So we're moving them west and then adding buffer planting all along that road. So I'm going to roll through these. Existing aerial. These are the amenities currently existing, the parking at the golf club and the golf course itself. And you can see ghosted back there the road network. So the new driving range, the new sports fields moved away from the property line and closer to the highway. And remember that berm? We can actually bench in seating to look out over the ball field. So not only is it stopping the sound and providing a planting area, but it's also providing seating and viewing to the ball field. So it's, we hope, a very smart use of that grade. This is the berm plan, the berms coming through, and the buffer planting along the Camp Logan neighborhood. And then the access road coming in and the loop road. And then the parking associated with each of the different amenities along the road. We really want the loop road to not be like driving through a parking lot. Currently, the experience is you have cars on both sides and you're moving through that road. What if that were more like a parkway with trees planted tight against both sides, and you turned off and you went into a parking lot that was running parallel to it that would be shaded by hardwood trees. And then this is the Seymour Lieberman Trail cutting in through here. And then the multi-use trail that is the kind of perimeter trail or outer loop trail. I know that's a hard one to see it appear. Boom, it's sliding in through there. So then the Blossom, this is Blossom Street and Arnott. So the natatorium constructed and enclosed, the tennis center and fitness center constructed, the gathering spaces that I mentioned, the clearings in the forest, the buffer planting along Crestwood, and these are at times 130 feet deep of forest of trees added in. The access roads, the parking, the Seymour Lieberman Trail threaded through, and the multi-use trails for the park. The next section is the Land Bridge and Memorial Groves. So you're seeing the current living bridge and the tenant running center, Memorial Drive, the Land Bridge in place, the parking for the Memorial Groves that delineate the different regiments, the Memorial Groves planted, the SLT coming in, and the timing track proposed currently in this location. And then the multi-use trails with the switching moment where you can get off the SLT and onto the multi-use. Bikes would not be invited onto the SLT, so it's an intentional separation there. And then the mountain bike trails coming in just below the running center in this slide. And then for Picnic Loop, I'll roll through these. The Land Bridge, the tip of it right there, the access roads turning this into a bridge, new parking, the trailhead program, so this would really be your orientation device for heading out into the different trails, a playground area for kids right here, new toilets in this location. SLT to the north with connectors that could bring you under this bridge to extend your run. The multi-use trail connecting to SLT here, multi-use trails to the south through the woods. The mountain bike trails added in, so you can start to see how we call this the family recreation area, for lack of a better term. If a donor would like to step up and pay for it, we'd love to name it for you. But it is a place where a family could come and park, and there's something for every member of the family at every age, from playground to mountain bikes to training wheels and to walking quietly. You can access from this point, access down right to the river's edge. And then here the hiking trails that take you along these edges of the drainage ways. We're not inviting people down into the barrancos. We'll maybe bridge over with, when I say boardwalk, I mean a wooden trail, basically, with curbs on the side so people don't roll off or fall off. But that we'd really respect those more fragile soils. So you'll see, when you see the grading and topography of the drainage ways, you'll see these trails are kind of skirting along the upper lip of those canyons to try to protect the more fragile slopes. So here you have the summary diagram. I think it's everything that I've talked about. I'll leave it on this one, but I just wanted to announce the next Monday, January 12th, 6:30 to 8:30 is the next of the public meetings. So I know that you've all been gathering your cards. I've talked too long. I'm going to turn the microphone over to Joy, and Odile. First, Odile is going to summarize, and then Joy. Thank you.
I'll hurry. Se propone hacer mejor uso de las áreas de servicio al público. En la actualidad contamos con 27.15 millas de áreas de servicio. El plan maestro propone aumentar la cantidad de senderos de servicio al público a 50 millas o más, contando con aproximadamente 40 millas para peatones, 7.5 millas de conectividad y 30 o más millas para ciclistas, incluyendo 1.5 millas para ciclistas infantiles. Se planean 8 millas de bicicleta de montaña, incluyendo 1 milla para niños. El camino ecuestre se aumentará a 3.5 millas. La intención en todo momento es la de hacer la experiencia de la gente que visita el parque una experiencia agradable, facilitando la circulación y darle mantenimiento a los campos deportivos y a las áreas verdes en todo momento. Es importante la aportación del público para mantener estas áreas limpias y que sigan las reglas indicadas en los anuncios. Al final de la presentación tuvimos la oportunidad de ver cómo lucirá el parque una vez que este proyecto se haya terminado. Se presentaron diapositivas donde pudimos apreciar todas las innovaciones una por una. Pudimos apreciar la ubicación de nuevos estacionamientos, campos deportivos, gimnasio, canchas de tenis, arboladas, puentes y senderos. Por último, quiero agradecerle su asistencia esta noche en nombre de todos nosotros. Gracias por acompañarnos a crear un mejor parque para todos. Y recuerden que quedan cordialmente invitados a hacer uso del Memorial Park, que es un parque de todos y para todos. La próxima junta se llevará a cabo el día 12 de enero de 6:30 a 8:30 en Moody Park Community Center. Muchas gracias y buenas noches.
Hello, everyone. If you've been to these meetings before, you know that this is now your time when I come up to the floor. My name is Joy Bailey Bryant, and I'm Managing Director, U.S. for Lord Cultural Resources. And my colleague Priya Sarkar and I have had the great pleasure of working with Memorial Park Conservancy, Uptown Houston, HPARD, and the NBW team on this master planning process. One of the important things about tonight is especially to share what NBW has been doing around the master planning, sharing these new the developments, but also having the opportunity to have your questions answered. So throughout the night, of course, Suzanne has been walking around collecting questions on cards. I have quite a few of them in my hand, and I'm sure she has more in the basket. And I'm going to call to the stage. We have 4 chairs set up here. I'm going to call to the stage Shelley Arnold from Memorial Park Conservancy, Sarah Newberry from Uptown Houston, Lisa Johnson from Houston Parks and Rec Department, HPARD, and they're going to be joining our wonderful Thomas Woltz, who is from MBW, and he did not speak for too long because we still have 30 minutes or so for questions, for your questions. Exactly. We're right on time. We wanted to allow quite a bit of time for this question and answer period. I'm going to start out very quickly with a question, kind of an easy one for Shelley. Why don't you have the meetings closer to the park?
We actually did. So we started with our public input sessions, and we had 4 meetings very close to the park. However, as we mentioned at the beginning of this one, Memorial Park is a city-wide asset. It's not just a park for neighbors who live nearby. And we, the mayor's administration, HPARD, and TERS, all felt that it was very important to take the message of what's happening and the discussion out to various parts of the city. So the last meeting that we had in the 3rd Ward at the El Dorado Ballroom. This meeting here, the next meeting we'll have at near Moody Park. And so we are intentionally holding these meetings throughout the city.
Perfect. Another question about the neighborhood, from neighbors and neighborhood. Please explain what Camp Logan interpretive areas and historical entrances will mean for the residents of Crestwood. And I kind of like to, because we have so many questions, I'm not going to abridge the questions, but I am going to group them a little bit. So there was another question that says the neighborhoods around the park, Camp Logan and Crestwood / Glen Cove, are very concerned about parking in the area with the expansion of recreational areas, particularly those near Crestwood. And so it's asking a similar question around the neighbors are very concerned about noise levels and security. So can you please explain more? Hello. Yes.
Okay, great. All right. Happy to give this up, though.
No.
Okay. So to answer the question about, this is a decent slide to do it on, but let me go. Actually, no, I'm just going to, it'll take too long if I go one by one. I'm just going to, sorry. The drive, the Eastern Loop, we intentionally put all the parking along the Eastern Loop of this area, this new gathering area, in between the Great Lawn and the Loop. So you have Crestwood neighborhood, 100 to 150, I guess the max 150, the narrowest around 100-foot forested buffer, planting strip, the road, then the parking, and then the gathering lawn with the SLT between you. There's a lot between. I mean, we've really pulled this stuff away from the neighborhood. And it's still not enough?
It's not enough. We live right on Crestwood. The noise is amazing already. We can hear the baseball diamonds. Also, who lived on Aspen, we could hear that. And when you have people aggregating in that area out there, people are playing boom boxes and everything till all hours of the night. And we already don't have parking on Crestwood. I mean,
So
well, I don't know how you going to fit all those people. This aggregation of people coming into that park.
the parking numbers, Jeff, can you help me with Jeff and Elisa, the exact number? We're not adding any parking spaces at the park, but we're not taking them out. We're just redistributing them across the park. So remember, there are 220 spaces going on this far western edge, parking spaces all along the areas up here, and then 2 lines of parking around that lawn, but they're thrown on the other side of the Crestwood neighborhood. I mean, I'm sorry?
Okay, everybody, just because we don't have a lot of time, if you can either write your questions on a note card and we can make sure that they're answered, because for instance, questions about the number of parking spaces, we can answer those directly, and those can be put absolutely on the website, but we want to be able to get to these large number of questions for everybody, so if you can put the questions down, we can have a lot of big conversation. Sorry.
I just wanted to interject, because time is limited and we do need to move on, doesn't mean we're trying to shut down the conversation.
Not at all.
I want to make everyone aware that we are in the process of setting up meetings with leadership from all the different neighborhoods. We're aware this is a big concern, and understandably so. I do think that in some ways what Thomas is proposing is not more than what you've experienced to date, but that concern about can we improve things for your current experience and be good neighbors is definitely something that's important to us. So please do know that we will address questions on the website, and we will be meeting with all of the adjacent neighborhoods leadership in the coming 2 weeks. So we'll have a chance for further discussion and to give that input back to the planning team. So thank you. So these are meetings with the different neighborhood associations and the civic groups, the leaders of these. So they're the ones that I have spoken to have talked about getting with their boards and with their neighbors. And again, you can feel free to write your question right now, and any question received tonight we will address on the website, and any of those that you turn in tonight regarding these issues, happy to bring those to those meetings and have those further conversations.
Very good, Sarah. In fact, I was going to end on this question, but since this meeting does not afford the opportunity for dialogue regarding design features, what mechanism is available to citizens to provide comments on the design and to get more specific details on current design elements? And just as Sarah shared, we have the memorialparktomorrow.org website where you can not only see this meeting tonight, have your questions asked and answered, you can also see the questions that others asked and have the answers to those, as well as videos of the last presentation. So as far as historical record goes and the meetings that we can film and can put up, we are doing that on the website. The next question we want to address is for Sarah, and this is around where is the funding coming from to make all of these changes? Will there be a tax increase on the surrounding homes?
I like how I get the hard question about funding. Well, I think the reason that question is coming to me, I'm with the Uptown Houston, the Uptown Tours, and as many of you know, part of bringing the park within Uptown Tours area provides that legal mechanism that Chris Knapp talked about to spend money there, which is a good thing, and certainly over the next 25 years we'll be doing that. It is not going to necessitate a tax increase. Just to briefly describe how a TERS, which is a tax increment reinvestment zone works. The real estate, the property taxes in those areas exist, and the city caps the amount that they take. The ad valorem, or remaining value, is then spent within that district. So think of it this way: it's really city tax dollars that, instead of going into a central pool, stay local and are spent within that district. This plan, the bold vision that Thomas and team are rolling out, which really is a long-term vision, where we will need to have a partnership with the Memorial Park Conservancy. And so definitely don't want people walking away feeling that the bills are covered, that the TERS can do all of this on its own. But the great news is that there is $100 to $150 million projected, earmarked for this project. And we look forward to working with the Conservancy to raise the balance to do what we need to do to make this possible. Thank you.
Thanks. The next set of questions is about future plans, and it's going to start with Shelley and go on to Thomas. What is going to happen with the new Running Trails Center, the existing Running Trails Center on Picnic Lane? It says, what is going to happen with the new Running Trails Center on Picnic Lane?
So the new Running Trails Center we opened up a 4,500 square foot building last month, and that's was a collaboration between the Memorial Park Conservancy and Houston Parks and Recreation and very generous donors. That actually, it's already happening. We have showers, lockers, bike rack, water fountains. We have meeting space. We will have event rental facility space available. And ultimately, we will be able to have even, fun events in the evenings, music. We have a little bit of refinement we still need to do to the Running Trail Center. But it's not as much a function of what will happen as what is already kind of happening there. Did I get the question?
Yes.
Is there another?
Yes,
Okay.
I think you did. And then, actually, this next set of questions for Thomas, I think you've answered quite a few of these, actually. What plans are there for bicycle use? Can the 1 mile section of the existing jogging trails be slated to be abandoned, be turned into a bicycle lane?
I hope whoever's
I think
asking
that was
those.
before you got to
Yeah, I
that
think those
part,
questions
yeah.
might have come in before I did the whole trail network with the distances, and we got trails covered. I hope.
And I'm just going to kind of reel through, what about existing and future equestrian uses, which I think Thomas also
Yep,
covered.
we're expanding the equestrian trails, the potential for an equestrian facility. Any others?
Yes, children's play, what are the plans in place for children's play areas?
So the playground at the Family Recreation Center, just south of Memorial Drive.
And then likelihood of keeping a rugby pitch at Memorial.
And there's a rugby pitch in the northern segment in the park.
What will be done to improve the pool facilities and shower toilet area for the pool?
So the swimming pool being
This is
enclosed
rapid
as an
fire.
auditorium. Yeah, these must have been early questions.
Yeah, I think these were earlier. Yeah, and then this last one, how will the wildlife corridors, mostly along the drainage features, be preserved and enhanced?
Okay,
It goes a different way.
managing invasive plants, replanting with native plants, both ground cover, shrub layer, and trees along those drainage ways. Those are in a way, they're really the way to take the temperature of the health of the land, is how those drainage ways are managed and stabilized. So this is part of that mandate of increased support for maintenance within the park, for management of invasive plants, and really protecting those fragile drainage ways. Also, as I think I mentioned, the path network stays to the upper lips of those and not inviting people to really cut their own trails or blaze their own trails through those.
Perfect. Currently, this is for Sarah or Shelley. Currently, the speed limit on Memorial increases to 40 miles per hour within the park. It is 35 miles per hour both ways outside of the park. With all of the cycling, running, walking park users, can speed be reduced?
Traffic is a big problem in the park and through the city, especially with greater amounts of hiking and biking going on. I don't know that anyone here is really in a position to say definitively. Those sorts of things happen through other city agencies, public works, but we are working closely with a traffic consultant and getting input on those things. I do think that some of the improvements with the bridging and the tunnels, part of the idea is to moderate the experience, is that fair to say, Thomas? I'm going to let you speak to this, of the Memorial Park Drive, so that it has some ups, it has some downs, that there's an experience there. It's not just a complete straight shot through. Our traffic consultant, Edwin Fredericks of Walter P. Moore, did feel like some of those things might, in fact, slow things down. There's always the opportunity to look at the intervals of intersections and the timing of those lights, but all of that gets into traffic management, which is a broader issue than this master plan can really address. But
One more thing, in the trail design that we're doing, safety is a big consideration. And so for most of the trails, we're looking at moving them away from roadways. And so, that'd be great if we could slow the traffic down on Memorial Drive. We're not sure we actually can, but we can do many other things to enhance safety.
And another kind of safety question, will a land bridge attract tunnel people? Homeless people are often desperate for dwelling spaces.
I'll take a stab at it, but you might have more experience here. The tunnel would actually be a tunnel for cars. I don't know that it would be a super hospitable for people. So my thought would be no, but Thomas, you might have, okay.
Okay, all right. Moving a little bit back to the public spaces, do you foresee safety issues by placing lighting, roads, very public spaces in a more condensed area? I think they're talking about the public spaces, the last part of the presentation.
Okay.
I believe. I'm interpreting.
My hope is that by concentrating the ball fields to the north along the highway and having lighting with the fields and their parking, and that's in one area, that you've actually increased the eyes on the road, the eyes on the street, the eyes in the parking and on the field, so that my hope is that safety is increased as opposed to remote individual fields that are solitary at the current time.
Okay, that's great. I'm going to switch. There's a lot of runners in the. What is the timetable for rebuilding the 3-mile track around the golf course? And then, is there a plan to lengthen the running trail beyond the current 3 miles?
I'll take some of that, because I put this slide together and neglected to mention it. When I started talking about what a master plan does and is and the pace at which it rolls out, we'll be waiting for some of these things to happen for a while. And so I wanted to say there's actually a lot of great stuff happening in the park now. So we're not, the Conservancy and HPARD are not waiting around for the master plan to be doing some good things. And I wanted to highlight that the Running Trail Center opened in October. 100,000 trees were planted earlier this year in Memorial Park. 200 acres in the park are currently being treated for invasive plants. A robust tree inventory and flora fauna count is underway. We call that a BioBlitz, or a biological survey, biodiversity survey. Maintenance has been increased on landscaped areas and gardens. The Seymour Lieberman Trail will be refurbished. That is going underway, and I believe funding for that was approved by the TERS, is going to finance the refurbishment of the Seymour Lieberman Trail, awaiting a reconfiguration of it to get it to 3 miles, but it needs to be safe right now. And so this was an initiative that got pushed forward ahead of the line so that the trail surface gets some improvements, but its realignment will be forthcoming down the road. Repair to the south side trails will begin shortly, including improved signage and wayfinding, and a water line will be brought into the park to help with irrigation and firefighting. And I have to say, as an outsider, it's been amazing to watch I mean, the fact that that question was answered, are my taxes as a neighbor going to go up because all this money is going to be spent on the park in my front yard? Anywhere else, the answer to that would kind of be yes. And in Houston, you figured this thing out to where the answer is no, your taxes won't go up, but the amenity of your front yard is going to go way up. It's kind of amazing. And so I sit in on these meetings as an outsider and hear, the tourists say, well, we'll fund that big water line coming into the park because we fund infrastructure within our neighborhood. So it's pretty amazing that so many things are possible here in Houston that I don't see in the other 10 big public parks we're doing in other places. They don't have this mechanism in place such that you're all able to enjoy an amenity without paying taxes for it in an increased way. So that's something, like, who wants to pay for a water line? That's a pretty unsexy thing, but it's a very important thing, and it's critical infrastructure. So it's been pretty exciting to watch this start to roll out, that something like that, that's not a thrill to pay for, but really important for park safety, for firefighting and irrigation, is happening thanks to these really unusual structures that Houston has figured out.
Well, since you brought up the water line, is there still a consideration being given to building a new water supply line to Memorial Park for irrigation and fire control?
Yes.
There you go.
Thanks for queuing that up. No, just to backtrack for a minute, to the Sieberman Trail refurbishment and the water line have both been approved by the Tours Board and funding allocated. The trail refurbishment, just to be perfectly clear, will follow the current alignment of the trail, so it's not a reconstruction or an expansion for right now, but it is putting down new surfacing on the trail and making it safe and runnable, and that should ideally hold us for the next 4 to 6 years, and that's certainly, given how many people use that trail, is obviously a project that's a candidate to look at early on. The water line, so I'm sorry, just to backtrack briefly, the refurbishment will start in January after the marathon, so after the majority of the heavy-duty training is going on, and should be done, Rod, do you remember? May. So it'll be relatively quick. The water line will look to implement sometime in the summer and should run, we think, 6 to 8 months. And that will give the park firefighting capabilities and, as needed, irrigation in the case of establishment planting.
Perfect. What considerations have been given to the less able and handicapped in this plan, particularly regarding access to the south side of the park? What becomes of the existing golf clubhouse? I think that's separate. What considerations, sorry, I was reading the complete. What considerations have you given to the less able and handicapped in the plan, particularly regarding access to the south side of the park? With that?
The multi-use trail that threads through that I've mentioned is kind of an orientation device that goes through the entire south side. That trail, we haven't selected a material yet, but we're looking at natural crushed stone with a binder so that it would look like, it would be a pervious surface, but it would hold together so that a wheelchair could get across it, a pram could get across it. But we want it to look like pervious natural, earthen trails. So meeting all the needs and the aesthetics and the infiltration goals are really important. And so we're looking at this crushed aggregate with a binder that would improve that accessibility of the pedestrian trails, the multi-use trail.
In the family area, too.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, it's in the family area. Our trails consultant, we've been looking at not exceeding slopes of more than 5% for a preponderance of the trails. And the last part of the question, are there no
What becomes of
alterations to
the existing golf clubhouse?
existing golf clubhouse stays as it is.
Yeah. Just to complete. But coming back around to amenities, will you put in a new amenity before you take out an existing one? Yes.
I'm here today representing Joe Turner, and that was one of the mandates he
Yes, that is
stressed
exactly
today.
what he said
Yes,
today.
before a new facility or an old facility be shut down, a new facility would be in its place. So there'll be a lot of phasing with this plan.
I'm going to hand this one off for a second while we figure that one out. And then the land bridge would provide access. This came after the first land bridge question, so I couldn't group them together. The land bridge would provide access across Memorial Drive, but I have concerns about safety for road users. Will lighting in tunnels be consistent with outside sunlight so drivers won't be blinded by the sun when exiting or unable to see when entering?
Sure. No, none of this happens without Texas Department of Transportation approval, and there are very strict rules on the lighting of tunnels for safety. So, of course, nothing would be built not in compliance with those laws. So, yes.
Great. And then here's another amenities question. Will there be more bathrooms throughout the park?
Yes.
See, easy lobbing
Here, I'll take
questions.
this one.
Okay, good.
There's a question about where will the crits go, the bike races that are currently on Picnic Loop? Will there be something like that? And that loop is intended to be placed in the northwest quadrant of the park. And it will be much better built and with cyclists in mind in its construction. And 1.5 miles with safe clearances on both sides. So it would actually be designed for cycling. I don't know, actually. Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Well, on that same note, what is the proposed surface of the circular multi-use trails?
That's what I was just.
Yeah, there you go. So that takes care of that one. Won't doubling the number of trails be even more disruptive for wildlife than the trails we have now?
The location that I was describing before, by keeping the trail network dispersed to the upper reaches and not down into the valleys, will allow those long wildlife corridors to be actually better connected than they are now. More trails means more dispersed people, so less concentrations of people in the park. I think all told, it's a positive for the park to have these are 4-foot wide trails, so they're this big. They're not uncrossable by wildlife, and they'll all be natural surface except for the aggregate one that is the ADA multi-use trail, the single trail. So there'll be mulch and earth, so I don't think they're going to be a big inhibition to wildlife. That is certainly not our goal.
Okay, and this will be the last question. The fill dirt used to build up the overpass, where would it come from? Consideration of type said for native plants, would new lakes or water areas be created from holes left over from soil?
I think the question is, yeah, so.
Start with the fill dirt used to build up.
The fill dirt will have to meet our specifications for healthy soil. We happen to know a lot of developers in the uptown area, and hopefully can get the soil at reasonable prices. We'd love to reduce trucking. With the expansion of the ponds, we will have soil from on site that we can use, I think was the second half of the question.
Yes.
The excavation of those ponds would provide a certain amount of soil, probably not the quantity needed. One thing in the detailing of these kinds of crossings, which are, for those of you that have ever maybe driven through Colorado, there are some spectacular wildlife crossings that are about the scale of this. They're typically for megafauna, for moose and elk and bear to move across highway corridors. So we're looking at that technology where they're earth-filled. It's not for the entire 30 feet necessarily soil. You can fill with other things. You can use crushed concrete and gravel and other materials that are stable that lift up the soil, because you don't really need 30 feet of soil. The roots of the largest trees won't penetrate that far ever. So the entire thing wouldn't be filled with soil.
Okay. There's one more question I do want to ask, because it's the and other activities. Will Will the rodeo trail riders still be accommodated by the new plan? That's a good question, but the second part, also other activities such as the Bayou Arts Festival and activities such as this still be accommodated?
The question, the answer to that question is we've actually tried to look at, like we're listening to all the users we can. We've looked very carefully at the needs of the rodeo, the exact square footage they require for camping and occupying the park. And this new road of Memorial and this area that is the equestrian facility actually can accommodate all the square footage that the rodeo needs. So it's adjacent to our proposed equestrian center, so you'd have those amenities, and it starts to bring a logic to where the rodeo would end up. The
then
Arts
other
Festival, I mean,
activities.
this area really could be occupied for those, what is it, 2 days a year?
Yeah.
The rodeo is there, 2 days a year for that use. If we can overlap use, then I think we're doing a successful thing. It's a bummer for those 2 days, and we'll say the third day of cleanup for the cycle track, but using that impervious surface to accommodate the rodeo is, I think, a really good double use of an amenity.
And potentially the Arts Festival as well.
Yeah, exactly, the other activities. That was what we thought I thought that would be particularly important, especially addressing the other activities and that space for that. I want to draw your attention to several things on this handout that you received when you came in. This is actually a handout of the 4 public meetings. Of course, we had one back in September today, and then there's another January the 12th, and then the last on March 9th. And at each meeting, you'll notice that NBW's presentation builds and builds and builds. There's more opportunity to ask more questions. There's more opportunities to understand what's happening. And I also want to draw your attention to the bottom of this sheet, memorialparktomorrow.org, where, as I said, go to the website, find more information about the process, the plan as it's taking shape, ask your questions, have your questions answered, and please take the time to do that. And we thank you so much for coming out tonight. I'm going to bring Shelley Arnold forward to give proper thanks.
Thank you again to Councilmember Stardig, to our partners, the Conservancy's partners in this process, including the Houston Parks and Recreation, Uptown Houston, also Nelson Bird Woltz, Lord Consulting, and the staff here, Odile. And I'd also like to thank my own team and staff at the Conservancy for their continued dedication, support, and work. Mil gracias. Nos alegra mucho que ustedes vinieron para estar con nosotros, comparten sus ideas y nos vemos en la próxima reunión. Thank you, everyone. We hope to see you in the next discussion.